Kamen Entchev here with Tom Casselman, back for some more Salute Your Sports. Tom, looking forward to an awesome show. We'll be talking college football playoff semifinals, Michigan, Alabama, Washington, Texas. Who's going to win? This might be the two most evenly matched semifinals in the history of the CFP. We're used to having, one close game, one blowout game. Usually the 1-4 is a blowout, the 2-3 is close. I think last year might have been the other way around, but very rarely do we get, I think actually last year both were somewhat close, but very rarely do we get two close games. This time around, sure does feel like it. I think all four teams are fairly close. Should be a great, great bowl season. We'll go over a few New Year's 6 games, Georgia, Florida State, the two teams that maybe had an argument to get in that didn't get in. Who's going to win that matchup? And of course, got to go a little Mizzou homer, a little bias, get on the alma mater. I just noticed I'm wearing Ohio State red, but that's not who I'm going to be picking. I'll tell you that. So we'll talk about that game as well. A couple monster matchups in the NFL. The Baltimore Ravens and the Miami Dolphins, both coming off statement wins, especially Baltimore. But, Miami beat Dallas, Baltimore clobbered San Francisco. That's going to be a matchup for the number 1 overall seed in the AFC playoffs. If the Ravens win, number 1 seed is clinched. If the Dolphins win, it's actually not technically clinched, but they would go a long way, right? They'd have the tiebreaker. They'd be tied. So Miami would have to lose the last game. Baltimore wins the last game. But otherwise, pretty much number 1 overall seed in the AFC on the line. So that'll be good to get into. We'll have our betting locks, our sports trivia. A little bit of a tough week on betting locks. But, unlike you, Tom, I am a lot more confident in this week delivering. Cannot wait to get started, Tom. How are you doing today?
Doing fantastic and looking forward to what, like you said, will certainly be an interesting college football playoff. And the Lions on these games are relatively short, 1 possession games. I believe it's 2 points in the Alabama-Michigan game, 4-point spread in Washington, Texas. I wouldn't be surprised, however, if either of these games end up being a blow, because that's just kind of how the college football playoff seems to go this time of year and bowl season in general. I mean,
yeah, but
let's
bowls
just jump
and
right
college
in.
football playoff is a little different, Tom, because bowl season, so many guys sit out. The CFP,
Well, yeah,
for the most part, you're not having the star players sit out.
You're not, but it can still be. I mean, these still aren't professional players. I mean, let's look at what happened last year with TCU defeating Michigan in a pretty close game and then absolutely getting the doors blown off against Georgia, where, Georgia was definitely favored in that game by a significant margin, but I don't think anybody had it as that kind of, uninteresting game. It was so bad that it actually became more interesting to watch in a way, because it's like, well, let's just see how bad this can actually get. Let's jump right into the first matchup of the Michigan Wolverines and the Alabama Crimson Tide. If there is one coach in the college football ranks that seems to make the most out of his time, it's Nick Saban and what he does with Alabama. The most prevalent game I can think of is that BCS championship against Notre Dame, where they went in and it didn't even look like Notre Dame was a college football team, quite frankly, compared to Alabama. And that seems to be a pretty common thing with Nick Saban. We talk about bye weeks with Andy Reid in the NFL. You give Nick Saban this much time. But the question is, do you think, it's a very short odds, I think 2-point spread in favor of Michigan. Are you going with Alabama and the SEC on this one? Or are you going with Michigan, the Big Ten, Jim Harbaugh, finally for alma mater, advancing to a national championship and perhaps having a pretty good shot to win it? Because I think whoever wins this game is going to win the big one.
Yeah, I was literally about to say the exact same thing. You took the words out of my mouth, because that's my same thought. Whoever wins this one's going to win the whole thing. I was going to say these are probably the 2 best teams in the country. Maybe Georgia, maybe. I don't know. Georgia's pretty good. They did lose to Bama. But this is the big one. This is such a phenomenal game. 2 blue blood programs, as blue blood as it gets. This is the one that's going to have all the eyeballs out there. I think it is a toss-up. The 2-point spread, pretty fair, although I'd argue that, I'm going to pick Alabama. You know me, Tom. If Alabama's out there, it becomes very, very tough to pick against Alabama. On a betting front, I don't have this in locks of the week because I'm by no means convinced, but you better believe I'm going to take a wager on that game and put plus money out of my own money, because anytime you can get Bama on plus money, it's like Rafael Nadal on clay. There was a French Open. It was Nadal and Djokovic on clay, and Nadal was plus money, and my eyeballs were just like, oh my God, I'm gonna take Nadal plus money. I did, and I won. So you get the plus money on Alabama. You take Alabama. I agree with you, Nick Saban in the college football playoff. He's got such a successful history in the CFP. I mean, Alabama, I think they're always either in the championship or they're winning the whole thing. I mean, I think it was the first year, I think, to Ohio State, they got upset in that semifinal. But I think otherwise, they're always right there. You put them in the CFP, there's really no stopping Alabama. Nick Saban is the best coach in college football. I think Kirby Smart has actually out-recruited him in recent years. Kirby Smart is up there. Harbaugh's up there. But if you give me one coach with a month to prepare, a guy that's had that month in the past, whatever the layoff is, I'm going to take Nick Saban. Traditionally, I know it's a little bit different this year. I mean, in college football, points are up a lot. Alabama's run defense isn't quite as great as it used to be necessarily. I mean, losing Will Anderson hurts. But for the most part, they're still really, really good up front. I mean, that's a defensive line, linebackers, a team that you simply never, ever, ever seem to be able to run the ball against. What we have seen against Alabama, where they have been vulnerable, at least a little bit, is the passing game. That's how you beat Alabama. You beat them with the running quarterback. You beat them with the guy that can, air the ball out 15, 20 yards, 40, 50-yard chunk plays. That's just not Michigan's game. Michigan is a running team. They have a great running back, and they have a great offensive line. They run all over you. I think it's going to be a little bit tougher to run all over the SEC teams. Then I know the Big Ten's good on defense, but SEC has that defensive line, NFL talent, year in, year out. The Will Andersons, the Jalen Carters. These guys are so good. And I think, simply put, Jalen Milroe right now is playing incredible football. I mean, if he'd be probably my runner-up or my number 3 on the Heisman race had we been basing it off the second half of the year. I mean, Jaden Daniels, well-deserved. Michael Penix is great. But you look at the way Jalen Milroe has played the last, 4 to 6 weeks, he's right up there with those guys easily. He's the difference maker for me. He's the best playmaker. He can run, he can pass. The best weapon on the field for Alabama at the quarterback spot. I just don't think Michigan has that explosive offense. I know Corum's a great running back, but we've seen Michigan really falter at this step. I think, back-to-back years in the CFP? Well, they haven't been making the championship game. You could argue this is the best Michigan team so far. Do they take that step forward this year? I don't think so. Again, I'm not convinced, but I like Alabama. I like Nick Saban. They got the better coach. They got the better quarterback in this game. SEC has won 13 of the last 17 national titles. I don't think it stops now. Bama beats Michigan. The Tide rolls. Then they beat Texas. Oh, I probably shouldn't give away. Probably shouldn't give away my next pick. But then they get the rematch and win the national title afterwards, Alabama.
Yeah, I mean, in a normal year for an Alabama program, I might agree with you on that one. But, I mean, frankly, this has not been a normal year for Alabama. And yet Miller's playing better football. But, yeah, this is the same Alabama team that beat Georgia by 3 points. It's also the same Alabama team that beat a 6-6 Auburn team in Auburn by just 3 points.
That game's always close, though. It happened a couple years ago, too. I know it's not a great Auburn team, but Alabama and Auburn always seems to be close. I know for me personally, Tom, I really don't hold that game as much against them. Winning at Auburn when that whole team is just – that's their Super Bowl over there, Tom. I know that Auburn wasn't very good, but it's one of those games where you throw out the records.
And not just not even not good. Alabama needed some questionable play calling and some miraculous playing to even win that game. They're that's a bad loss away from them not even being in this conversation. Really, the point with that is
But they did that 2 years ago when the year they lost to Georgia in the national title game. It was the exact same thing against Auburn. Then they, went through the CFP semi, and they were maybe a wide receiver injury away from winning the whole thing against Georgia in the championship. It's the exact same thing we saw 2 years ago.
This just isn't the same level of Alabama team, in my opinion. I mean, looking at the two teams, I mean, I'm going to go Michigan because they're not necessarily a super explosive team, but because I don't think that Alabama is overly talented, particularly at the skill positions as they have been in previous years. I mean, let's just start with defense because that's where these teams are really well known. I mean, Michigan is second in the nation in yards per game allowed, Alabama 18th, and Michigan's first in points per game allowed, while Alabama's 16th. And when you flip that to the other side of the ball, I mean, defense more or less is a wash. Alabama is 60th in yards per game. Michigan a little bit behind at 65th in the nation in yards per game, but at points, Michigan is 12th in the nation in scoring on a points per game basis, while Alabama is 27th. So I think that the advantage for Michigan is that defense is a little bit better. I think their offense is a little bit better. I don't think
and
this
that
is going
soft
to be
schedule. Don't forget that, Tom. The schedule we were talking about earlier this year. I know they beat
soft,
Ohio State. They delivered, but their schedule a lot softer than
That's
Alabama's.
where I'm coming in with this one is that at every opportunity so far this season, and I doubted Michigan early on because I said, hey, look at that soft schedule. But if we're going to talk about how teams played down the stretch, I mean, they didn't need J.J. McCarthy to throw a pass to beat Penn State, a pretty solid Penn State team, just a couple weeks before the end of the season. And then they went out again and proved it against an Ohio State team that is, still pretty good. Again, not the same level that Ohio State typically has been. But as far as that seems to be kind of the common theme across all of college football is that none of these programs really seem to be as good as they have been over the past couple of years. So in a down year with a lot more parity, I'm going to give a slight edge to Michigan in this one. I think if there's any coach that could kind of go up against Nick Saban, it's a guy who's made it to multiple NFC championship games, made it to a Super Bowl in Jim Harbaugh. And I think that I like Michigan in this game just a little bit better. I think this is definitely one where it should be close. I'd say of the two, I would say of like the likely outcomes, I think either Michigan wins in a pretty close game or Alabama surprises and just blows everybody out. Like I think those are the two likely outcomes or most likely outcomes in this game. I think it's just more likely with the way that Michigan's defense has played all year. I don't think that Alabama's offense is appreciably better than, say, Ohio State, Penn State, anything along those lines. And
Penn State's terrible at offense. They're way better than
looking
Penn
at that
State.
Big Ten championship game with Michigan. I mean, what they were able to do to Iowa's defense. I mean, of course, Iowa doesn't move the ball on offense whatsoever. But that they were able to put up as many points as they did on Iowa. I just like Michigan just a little bit better in this one. There's a totally fair argument, but that can be said for any of the games at this point. I think the only team that could have made the college football playoff that would say these shouldn't be close games would be Georgia, in my opinion. That's the one where you could say, okay, if it's Georgia against Washington or Texas, like that's something where it should be, over a 7-point line, in my opinion. Like that's the one exception. For all four of these teams, you can put them in a tumbler, shake them up, reseed the matchup just about any way that you'd like to. I think that's where I'm coming down on this one. Is we've got like four pretty good teams, but none of them are super duper special. In the absence of super duper special, I'm going to give a slight edge to Michigan on this one.
Yeah, that's actually it's interesting because I completely agree that there is no one that is super duper special. I agree with you. This isn't an Alabama team that's as good as some of the past Bama teams we've seen, but I don't think you kind of hit it right there. I don't think there's a standout team in this field that I look at that is an all-time great team. I mean, the champion this year is going to be arguably lesser than any of the recent year championships, which is, I know on your end is like parity. Let's give it to Michigan. On my end, it's the opposite because I look at, I agree with you. Harbaugh's a great coach, but I look at like Nick Saban will find a way to win in this scenario where there isn't an absolutely great team he has to face. I know his weapons aren't quite what maybe they've been in the past, but they're still really, really good players. So I think I agree with you to the point where maybe it's not the same Bama team. Maybe there's not a great standout team in this field, but I think that actually favors Nick Saban in Alabama, and it's going to help them win the national championship.
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll definitely see how that one goes. I think a game that is going to be, fun in a different way. I think Alabama and Michigan is going to be a lot of strategery, a lot of defense, a lot of field position, whereas I think Washington and Texas is going to be points, 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 points over here, points over there, points everywhere. Everybody gets a point in this game. Because this is, I think it's like a 63-point over under, something like that.
What's the thing Oprah says? Well, what's the quote?
Oh, you get a car, you get a car, everybody
you get a car,
yes.
You get a point, you get a point.
Yeah, I mean, and for this Texas Washington game, I think we're going the same way on this one because you said Alabama over Texas. You let that slip a little bit. I also agree Texas is going to be showing up in the championship game. Because if we look at, this is kind of like the inverse flip of the last game. Like I was saying, Texas 9th in yards per game and 13th in points per game, whereas Washington is 10th in yards per game and 8th in points per game in college football. So both really, really high-powered offenses. The defense is where the difference is.
Yeah, big difference. I have that written down
Texas
as well.
Is 20th in yards per game, 10th in points per game. Washington is 76th and 46th in those respective categories. Now, it's kind of odd. Like if any team can overcome the appearance of disparity, Washington certainly did that against Oregon, where I think everybody could say Oregon's a tougher team. They're better on defense, and yet Washington won both matchups. First one, missed field goal that would have gone to overtime had it been made, but they were pretty convincing in the last Pac-12 championship. So, obviously, Kamen. You have Texas. I have Texas. Do you what's the percentage chance then that you would give on this one? Do you see a likelihood that Washington could overcome, could pick up an upset? Is it something where they could keep it within that 4-point line? Or do you think that it's going to be Texas pretty far and away, and we're going to see a Washington team maybe be a little bit exposed perhaps for the first time this season because they haven't really been exposed for what people call them an overachieving team?
I actually think it's about 45% Washington wins. I'm a little split on the line because it's not a very big line. I would actually lean Washington to cover. So, I think Washington has a little bit more explosive offense. Their offense has just been electric. Michael Penix Jr. is delivering. But Quinn Ewers on Texas is really, really good.
He's no slouch.
Yeah, great spot at quarterback. A lot of good receivers for him. But yeah, what I have written down, Tom, Texas allows 17.5 points per game. Washington allows 23.6 points per game. More than half, in fact, almost all of Washington's wins down the stretch were one-score games. They've been really, really good in the one-score games. The field goal, the 7-point wins, they haven't really blown people out, except for, early in the season you play an FCS cupcake game. But you look at their Pac-12 schedule, it's almost exclusively one-score game, one-score game, one-score game, maybe a two-score game. But, you're not seeing 21, 28, 35. You're not seeing those blowout wins, which you see on even Texas's schedule. But what does that lead me to believe? They're good in close games, which this is dangerous. This is dangerous for Texas. If this is the tie game in the fourth quarter, Washington certainly is going to believe they can win because they've done it all year long. I do think, though, for me, I'm going to have to pick Texas because, as you and I both pointed out the stats, and you watch it on the field as well, their defenses are considerably better for Texas. So I'm going to pick the Longhorns in this game. But I think both of these games are close. I actually, even to the last game, you said more likely Bama wins it by a lot or Michigan wins close. I think that it's most likely Bama wins close, and it's most likely Texas wins close. I'm not all that confident in either of these games, if I'm being honest. I don't have either in my betting locks of the week. So I think actually Washington has the ability to hang with Texas. They're undefeated. Think about that. A lot of these other teams have losses. I think, was it Michigan and Washington and then Florida State are the only undefeated Power 5 teams. So they found a way to win all year long. And I'll say this, the Pac-12 is no slouch. The Pac-12 was actually probably a little bit better than the Big 12, right up there with the SEC. A lot of Pac-12 teams had excellent seasons this year. I mean, even USC was, in the mid to bottom of the Pac-12, and they just won a big bowl game last night without their starting quarterback. So the Pac-12 is a legitimate conference. I actually thought Oregon was going to make the CFP, but Washington beat Oregon twice. An Oregon team that was actually blowing teams out. So absolutely, Washington with Penix, all that, leadership, all that experience, all that great play. They got a shot in this one, but I think Texas has the better defense, the more well-rounded team. Hook 'em horns, baby. Texas to the championship. I know we'll have a week before to really delve into the matchups more, but I think the Alabama team that we saw early this season, where Milroe wasn't clicking, where he wasn't really ready to be the starting quarterback, it's a very, very different Bama team. So I'm going to go Bama over Texas, just like the 2012 national championship, Tom Casselman.
Yeah, and another thing we didn't even really touch on for the coaching matchup is Steve Sarkisian, former OC
at Alabama
for Alabama, with Nick Saban, also former NFL offensive coordinator. He's been on the job for a couple of years, so it feels like he's also getting his system more implemented, something that hasn't necessarily kind of come through the first couple of seasons. It sometimes take a little bit of time for these things to come into place, get the talent and the players around you that you need to ultimately have success. So that wraps it up for the CFP, but we still have a couple other bowl games we've mentioned. I think both of these teams, Georgia and Florida State in the Orange Bowl. Kamen, who do you like in this one?
Well, the line, I think last I checked, I got to double check it, but it was 16.5. And if it's moved just a little bit.
It's significant.
Tells you how much Vegas thinks Georgia's going to win by. Again, we could have this discussion ad nauseum about Florida State getting in, not getting in. I thought it was right they didn't get in. For me, I do have to look at the team right now. Honestly, you know me, Tom, even if their quarterback was healthy, I probably still would have put him out. But for me, what made the no-brainer decision to leave FSU out is because they were on their third quarterback, their starter out. I just don't see how a backup quarterback can go up against that Georgia defense and do anything whatsoever. I think the running back might be out as well, I'm hearing, for this game. And it's just crazy because we sit here and talk about, Georgia should have been out. We should have Florida State in, blah, blah, blah. But then you see what Vegas puts the line at, and you know how I believe it. And you even said it yourself. The biggest spread would be if Georgia was playing one of these teams. So I'm sitting here thinking to myself, like, how? You know how I am, Tom. I believe the best teams should play. Got to use your common sense. If these two teams played on a neutral field, who would win? Who are the top 4 teams in the country? Georgia, for me, no-brainer, is a top 4 team in the country. A lot of this game will be mindset. Does Florida State come out there and say, look, we were disrespected. We're going to prove you guys that we should be in the CFP. Does Georgia all of a sudden look at this like, well, hey, we've won back-to-back national title games. This game doesn't matter for us. Who cares? This is nothing. I think Georgia's going to come out and play well. I mean, I think it was the year Cincinnati went undefeated. They played Georgia in New Year's Eve Bowl, and Georgia won. A lot of folks thought they wouldn't care. Cincinnati would win. That wasn't the case. I think Georgia's got that program that is used to winning bowl games. Kirby Smart is an excellent football coach who have them prepared. More explosive offense. Florida State has a great defense too, though, Tom. This could be a lot of great defensive play on the field. But, I mean, the real question is Georgia going to cover? Because it's, more than a 2-touchdown betting spread. Georgia should win big, double digits easily. I'm a little split on the cover. I think there could be a backdoor situation. I think Florida State's going to play with some pride. Maybe Georgia puts some of their seniors in at the end if they're up. I would lean Florida State to cover just because of how good that defense is, how big that spread is. But I think Georgia's going to win comfortably.
Yeah, if you're definitely looking to make $100 and you've just got a 1,200 line around, you could certainly go money line Georgia
Oh, don't do that.
on that if you wanted to.
Don't do that.
I mean, there's certainly not really a huge argument for Florida State over Georgia, and that just kind of hammers home that you know CFP got caught in the middle of best team versus merit because we could easily determine that Georgia is the best team or one of the four best teams in the country should be in the football playoff, but then we would have perhaps multiple undefeated conference winners out or something along those lines. So I mean, Georgia, I mean, FSU does have a great defense. I'm not sure. I know Keon Coleman, their star wide receiver, has announced that he's going to the NFL draft. I don't know if he's officially said he's in or out of this bowl game. Certainly wouldn't be surprised or fault him. So, yeah, the Seminoles' weapons are greatly diminished on offense. This kind of feels like it'll be a valiant effort for about 3/4 of the game, and then Georgia's just going to pull away in the fourth quarter type of thing, quite frankly. I think that's how this game is going to go. So, also going with Georgia over Florida State in this one. Not really, I don't think like a whole lot to cover here. I think we can get a little bit more in depth, though, as Mizzou is making an appearance in our rundown, making it to the Cotton Bowl against Ohio State. Should be a lot of fun. Definitely going to be kind of an interesting sort of game because Ohio State is without their quarterback. Kyle McCord, starting for them all season, is already in the transfer portal because they can just start now. I don't understand really why we can't have that sort of thing pushed off until after bowl season.
Well, it's because of the recruiting. I think it's
I know the answer. I know the actual answer.
It's the recruiting dates, Tom. Though they're upcoming.
Yeah.
All that.
Frankly, push them all back. I mean, in no other sport is there any sort of free agency or anything during the playoff season or whatever.
That
just
is true.
How silly this whole time of year it is.
That's a good point.
Kyle McCord is already in the transfer portal. Marvin Harrison Jr. Seems likely to opt out. I think he is also declared for the draft. I think he's at the Cotton Bowl, but we're still unclear.
He's not practicing with the team.
Right.
I just read about this right before the show. There is not a confirmed, but more people
most likely
he's not playing.
Yes. I mean, and if I were going to be like a top 2 pick in the NFL, I certainly would make that decision too. And I also, the Buckeyes are down multiple running backs as they had one guy go through the transfer portal.
Travion Henderson is going to play though. I just read that.
Okay, so he's opted.
So their number
in.
one,
Okay.
their number one back. They're probably their second best player on offense besides Marvin Harrison is going to play.
Yeah, and I mean the reason why I'm bringing all this stuff up, I'm sure viewers at home kind of know where I'm going to be rolling with this one.
Sure.
Mizzou is rolling in at full strength.
Oh, Mizzou Bog! Thomas, Missouri.
The Ohio State defense is a staunch defense, but they're not really one that creates a lot of turnovers. And Brady Cook from Mizzou has been pretty good at limiting turnovers.
Unless I'm watching.
Unless you're watching.
Unless I'm watching in person, especially.
Yeah.
Then it's turnover fest. So I better not watch this game, but I'm going to.
Limiting his turnovers against a strong Ohio State defense, that's going to be the key to me with Missouri winning this game because you just got to maximize your possessions. And I think that with an Ohio State offense that is still talented, I mean, it's Ohio State, so they have lots of talent. It's just they haven't necessarily played. And we saw that work out pretty well for USC with their blowout over Louisville last night. But I think for Missouri, I think they're going to have a chip on their shoulder in this one. I mean, Ohio State's a little bit of a letdown where once again, you've lost to Michigan. Once again, you are not Big Ten champs after kind of having a stranglehold on that position. Not to say that they're not going to be invested in playing the game, but I mean, we see the social media clips of, Eli Drinkwitz and kind of the power, the sway that he has over that football team, the belief that they have in him. I feel pretty decent saying that Mizzou can roll in this one.
Yeah, I think so as well, Tom. Pretty much the entire Mizzou team is playing in this game. They're also, speaking of the transfer portal, not many Tigers in the transfer portal. This program is sticking together, so they have a lot more camaraderie. Again, if you're told me Marvin Harrison Jr., Kyle McCord's going to play. Now, Kyle McCord wasn't amazing by any means, Ohio State's backup is
good.
actually
Yeah.
probably just as talented. So it's not like they're going to throw out a really bad guy out there, but he was the starting quarterback for the whole season. He was their number one quarterback. Their number one receiver is out. I know their number one running back is playing, but they have a lot of good running backs. They have a lot of key players that are out in this game. You look at Mizzou's key players on offense in particular. Brady Cook had a great season at quarterback. We have Luther Burden III, who early, so Mizzou's offense kind of changed midseason. The first half of the season, when they were focused on passing the ball, Luther Burden was pretty much top 2 in every category nationally. He's pretty much right in the top 10 still, but the numbers slipped because the offense slipped. And Cody Schrader, the passing game rather, not because they were bad, but then they shifted to the Cody Schrader mode. The SEC's leading rusher, Cody Schrader, number 7 in the Heisman Trophy race, rightfully so. Arguably the best running back in college football. He was down the stretch. He was a top running back the second half of the year in the entire nation, Tom. Cody Schrader was. So Mizzou right now, and Luther Burden III, by the way, is going to be an NFL pickup. His NFL comparison is Deebo Samuel, which is pretty darn good. The most underrated receiver in the National Football League, Deebo Samuel. And then we have Cody Schrader, who, he got slept on out of high school. He was a D2 guy at Truman State. Even Mizzou slept on him. They got him as a walk-on. They got lucky, quite frankly. Say what you'll say about Diamond in the Rough. Mizzou got lucky on this one. I'm not saying he's going to be the next Christian McCaffrey by any means, but there is going to be some NFL team that is going to be pretty darn lucky to get Cody Schrader in the 6th or 7th round. Could be a very solid NFL starter, Mr. Cody Schrader in the NFL. So he's got a lot to prove, by the way. This is his chance to show up against a great defense. This is Burden's chance, Brady Cook's chance. These guys are going to come in here ready. Drinkwitz has him ready. He's got him fired up. Mm-hmm. I think if Ohio State was fully healthy and fully there, like if everyone was playing, I would pick Ohio State. But given that they've got more guys out, I think Mizzou's going to win. And I know we could easily sit here and say, like, you're right, Tom. The guys that are going to be out there on the field are going to try. There's no doubt about that. Ryan Day's a great coach. Ohio State's not going to just roll over. But if we're being completely honest, who does this game mean to more? Without question, it's Mizzou. If it wasn't the case, Marvin Harrison would be playing no matter what, right? He would be playing even with the draft stock. If this was Ohio State-Michigan rematch, he'd be playing in this game because he said it himself. He's thinking about coming back just so we can beat Michigan. So the fact
that's not a good enough reason to come back, in my opinion.
No, I know, and that's probably why he's not going to come back. But
yeah,
but you're talking about transfer portal. You're talking about guys sitting out bowl games because of draft stock. That's just it means more to Mizzou because their guys aren't doing it, Tom. This specific game means more to Mizzou, and that's a really good Mizzou team. I agree that probably Ohio State is a little bit more talented if they're fully there. But I mean, Mizzou is very, very talented because, we often think of talent as 5-star, 4-star recruits. We think of big bodies. Talent also shows up on the field. You can't always judge talent based on the 5-star next to you. The 6'5", 240-foot build, because Cody Schrader is not a 5-star. He's not a 4-star. He doesn't look like he'd be a good running back. I mean, he's relatively undersized. He's not super fast. He just got that kind of like that Jerry Rice, like the glide on the field. I'm not saying he's slow, but he doesn't really look like a great player. But talent on the field in terms of production, his talent is through the roof. So I don't really think there's that much of a talent disparity. I guess Mizzou did better in picking up some of those 3-star guys than Ohio State did. Mizzou this year, Tom, they lost on the road to Georgia, which they were in that football game the entire way. I watched the game. They were winning at one point. I think it ended up being double digits at the end because they had a turnover and then they had to go for it in their own territory. But it was a one-score game most of the way on the road to Georgia. They lost at home against LSU, a game that they led almost the entire game. They quite frankly Mizzou'd it, which is the only game they Mizzou'd the whole year. So you're due for one. So this is a really, really good Mizzou football team. Honestly, I think it would even be a really good game if both teams were, full of strength. But given that Ohio State's not, I like Mizzou in this one, and I'm feeling pretty good about it. Good enough to maybe make an appearance at an upcoming segment.
Oh, interesting. Well, I think that might be a reciprocated effort on the program. But for now, we will move on to the Dolphins and Ravens game coming up. Both teams having statement wins. I mean, Miami's certainly got, I think, probably their first statement win of the year as far as beating a good team. But Ravens probably got the biggest statement win of the year going up against a 49ers team that, I mean, everybody was shining their shoes, getting them ready to go straight to the Super Bowl. No need to even play the rest of the season. They are that good. And we saw the Ravens absolutely pound them, basically beating them at their own game. I think we saw probably one good player. We saw Christian McCaffrey having a huge outsized impact for the 49ers, but everything else kind of felt a scuffling. So for this upcoming matchup, Kamen, I think we're probably going to be split on this one, just kind of knowing how we viewed each of these teams throughout the season. I picked against Miami last week. You picked against the Ravens last week. Are you going to surprise me and say that that Baltimore is going to win this one, or do you think that the Dolphins continue on an upward trend against good teams in the NFL?
Are you ready for this?
I'm braced.
I've thought a lot about this. I'm going to surprise you. I'm picking the Baltimore Ravens, man.
Wow.
So the Miami game was an exception because I did pick Miami against Dallas, and I did want Miami to win. But for the most part, I found myself all year long in these 50-50 matchups. Who's going to win? It's evenly matched. Both teams are really good. And I always pick the one that I want to win. That just because in a matchup like this, Tom, you can make reasons for both teams. You really can. But I'm going to lean Baltimore here. I hate to do it. By the way, that Baltimore 49er game, the Niners had 429 total yards. I got it pulled up right here. The Ravens had 343. It was 5 picks to 0. So, I mean, San Francisco was able to move the ball against Baltimore. They just turned the ball over. So that's, how it is in the NFL. It's all about the turnovers. But that's what Baltimore does well. They lead the NFL in takeaways. So it wasn't just blind luck. They finished plays. I don't know if you saw the Kyle Hamilton play. He was on the ground and, after he had tried to go for a tackle or something, but he gets up and follows the play and he gets a tip ball for an interception. That was very symbolic of a team that never gives up on a play and a team that leads the NFL in takeaways. It's a pretty open game. Miami has done well against Baltimore in recent years. I know last year they had that crazy comeback, but I think Baltimore was down 1 or 2 corners that game. Certainly a much different defense right now. It's definitely a toss-up. But if I'm looking at the current form, Baltimore has the number 1 scoring defense in the NFL, allowing 16.3 points per game. They're sixth against the pass, and 26 takeaways, most in the NFL. Their offense, though, equally, maybe not equally, but pretty close to equally impressive. They're averaging 28 points per game. Dolphins about 31 to lead the league, but you take out that Denver game, their offenses have been pretty similar, at least scoring the ball. Now, we know Miami is a far better passing team, but Baltimore's run offense, it just works, Tom. It really, really works. And Zay Flowers, do I dare say this, a coming out party? I mean, he's been really good all year, but San Francisco, my goodness, they got floured, Tom. That's what happened in that game. He's a fantastic young wide receiver. It's very, very tight. It's very, very tight. I think that Miami's defense, which I've talked about, how much they're improving, how much better they are. They got the great defensive coordinator. Jalen Ramsey's healthy. And I truly believe all of that, Tom. I picked Miami to make the AFC Championship game in the preseason. I've stuck with them all year, but I got to go with the Ravens based on current form. Miami, by the way, Tom, 4-3 on the road. They play much better at home, and this is a road game in Baltimore. So I'm going to lean Baltimore because of the home field and just because of we can sit here and say that confidence, all these guys are confident. But when you beat the Niners by 2 touchdowns, quite frankly, almost 3 at one point they were up, that has to do something for your team. That just a complete belief that it's going to work out. That has to be something. I know Miami's getting confidence, finally winning against a good team, but this is a great Baltimore team. Now, I don't know who I'm going to pick in the playoffs because you know how I don't trust Lamar in the playoffs. I also don't think Lamar's the MVP. He had a great game. Everyone's labeled him the MVP right now. I think they're the best team because of their defense at the current moment. The way they're playing defense right now, and they don't even necessarily have it's a defense by committee type thing, right? Like they have a lot of really good players, but they don't have one guy that's going to be defensive player of the year necessarily. But I mean, you look at the numbers, by the way, Lamar, even in QBR and passer rating, he's like 7th, 8th in the NFL. Even if you add in rushing and passing yards combined and total touchdowns, he's literally top 5 in exactly 0 quarterback categories. So I struggle to give him the MVP just because he's the quarterback on the best team. That doesn't work for me personally. I mean, if you watch that game, you got to give it to McCaffrey. But, we'll see if that happens. But here's one. If Miami does somehow win, Tom, Tua might win the MVP, which I would love because I'm a big Tua fan personally. Even without Tyreek Hill, even without Jalen Waddle, he's delivered in some games this year. Pretty open game, but kind of like the Texas-Washington game. Offenses are close. Miami's better, but I look at the gap in Baltimore defense to Miami defense, pretty high. Miami offense to Baltimore offense, a little bit closer. Home field advantage has to matter. Miami, almost a 500 team on the road. Give me Baltimore at home to win a close game.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also going with Baltimore on this one. I mean, injury is going to factor into this one, as I believe Jalen Waddle, I think technically he's questionable, but it doesn't look like he's going to be playing. And of course, Tyreek Hill has been dinged up as well. So, I mean, when you take away arguably the 2 most important components to Miami's offense as far as that vertical passing game, I mean, that might be like one of the potent things to challenge this Ravens defense because a lot of what the 49ers do is more of a horizontal passing game. And definitely the Ravens show that they can have a pretty decent answer for that. It would have been interesting to see back-to-back weeks. Okay, now how do you do with these deep shots down the field? That might not necessarily be in the cards with injuries to the Dolphins' weapons. So, the Ravens, they're playing exceptional complementary football right now. And, they're just healthier for the most part. I know there's some injuries on the Ravens side, but they've been playing without Mark Andrews, and they've been doing okay with Isaiah Likely at tight end.
He's good.
They have a number of running backs. I know Keaton Mitchell is a really, really impressive big play running back that he is unfortunately out for the season, but they still have a couple different guys that can run the football for them. So they're just so balanced. It's tough to see Miami winning this one on the road. Again, at full strength, I think we get a lot more interesting of a game. The one thing that can make it still keep it interesting is that the Dolphins defense has been coming together as of a little bit late. They're, I guess it's taken them a bit of a season because Vic Fangio, we talk about how great of a defensive coordinator he is.
Fangio's a master.
I mean, it might just simply been the thing that it takes a little bit of time for that to gel. I mean, I know we look at these guys as they're professionals and it's just defense. How complicated can it be type of thing? But the way that he runs things with a lot more, I don't know if I necessarily want to say exotic blitzes or something like that, but he definitely plays defense in a way where he tries to confuse the quarterback, kind of goes with a lighter fronts and more dropped coverage. The Dolphins defense is playing a bit better.
Jalen Ramsey too, Tom. He wasn't there early in the season. I mean, we're talking about a Pro
Sure.
Bowl, All-Pro corner, one of the best in the NFL.
That definitely helps to have a good cover guy back there as well. Even though Jalen Phillips, their great pass rusher, is not going to be playing because he's out with injury. I think the Dolphins have a strong enough defense and a strong enough run game and a smart enough coach in Mike McDaniel that he can adjust things without Waddle, without Hill, if they end up being without both those guys. Excuse me. I'm not sure that those are confirmed outs for the game. I think Hill more likely to play again than Waddle, but if there is any sort of deficiency in personnel, I mean, Mike McDaniel is probably one of the top three guys that I would trust with game planning around that. So it'll still be a good game. I think it's still going to be a fairly close, but I mean, the Ravens, seeing what they did to the 49ers, and the 49ers at pretty full strength with all of their weapons last week, it's difficult to project that the Dolphins can overcome that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Moving over to the NFC side of things, we've got the Cowboys coming off of a disappointing loss to Miami, and the Lions with a pretty big win over the Minnesota Vikings, thanks to a number of gifts from now benched Vikings quarterback Nick Mullins. Jaren Hall, the rookie, will be getting the start for the Vikings, but
the quarterback
Cowboys,
carousel,
it continues for the Vikes. But Cowboys and Lions stable at the quarterback position. One of some of the few teams in the NFL blessed with that a kind of ability to say, okay, we're going to have a prime matchup with Dak Prescott, Jared Goff. So, Kamen, what do you like in this matchup for the Cowboys and the Lions? This is going to determine some playoff seeding, definitely having big implications down the line here.
Yeah, I mean, I think, if you look at the home road splits across sports as a whole, generally speaking, the home field advantage has been a little bit less important than in the past. But for the Dallas Cowboys, it is everything, quite frankly. I don't know what it is. I don't know, why that's the case. I'm just confirming here on my phone. They are currently, Tom, Dallas Cowboys 7-0 at home, and they're 3-5 on the road. Yeah, I got the standings pulled up. That's just such a different team at home. They just get in front of that home crowd, that comfortable stadium, that turf, and it's just such a completely different team. I know the Lions are a turf team as well. They're used to it, but it's just different. Dallas at home just hits different. It's a 5.5-point spread. That one could go either way. But it's kind of the theme we've been talking about today, which is interesting because, you and I have talked about all the rule changes in the NFL, how nowadays you need a quarterback. It's all about offense. It's all about passing. Well, this year, Tom, there's been more low-scoring games. The defenses are making a little bit of a comeback. Obviously, you got to have great offense and great defense. It's not always like does offense win, does defense win. The truth is it's somewhere in between. But I think you look at the game 20 years ago, it was definitely a little bit more you win with defense. Now it's been more you win with offense. This year it's kind of truly been more in the middle. If we look at the NFL, the defense has made a comeback, I think in large part because of the incredible defensive end pass rushers we have right now. Some of these freak athletes on the outside just make life super, super dangerous for opposition, like Micah Parsons, for example, in this game. Aiden Hutchinson on the other side for the Lions. But Detroit's defense is not good. They were overachieving a little bit earlier this season. They've kind of come back to, they've improved on defense. They were like worst in the league last year. They're not worst in the league this year, but they're still in the bottom 16 in NFL defenses, especially the last couple months. And that's where the massive difference is here, because we have two high-powered offenses, two quarterbacks playing maybe some of the best football of their career. We got, two of the best receivers in the league, CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown on the Lions side. We have, great running game for Detroit. Dallas, has just been clicking on all cylinders on offense. But the biggest difference here to me is two things. The home field advantage for Dallas, 7-0 at home, and then defense. Dallas is the 5th scoring defense in the NFL. The Lions are 24th scoring defense. And if you look at the last, last couple months, they're probably even lower than 24th. So Dallas just has such a big defensive edge. They're not going to stop the Lions. I'm not saying they're going to hold them to 10 points, but I think they're going to contain the Lions a little bit, and the Lions are not going to stop the Dallas Cowboys. So Dallas at home should win this game. Even though I did surprise you and pick Baltimore, I'm not necessarily sold on that game. I do feel pretty good about Dallas straight up in this one to take out the Lions.
Yeah, I feel pretty good about this one as well. I believe looking at the line, it's 5.5, which seems a pretty fair. But
it was just 6.5, and I think it opened at like 7.5 too. So it's
yeah,
been going down a little bit.
It's definitely been bet down, which I find a little bit interesting. I mean, like you said, the Lions defense overachieved earlier in the season, and Dallas certainly has the weapons to take advantage of that. You've got, Dak Prescott, of course, at quarterback with his just, I mean, you can pull him anywhere on the field, run any route. CeeDee Lamb has been fantastic this year. And like I mentioned last week, I mean, Jake Ferguson emerging as a nice tight end outlet option, and even their running game, I think can pick up a little bit of steam, hopefully, for Tony Pollard and for Rico Dowdle for the running game to provide a little bit of balance. But I think a big key is that we've seen of recent vintage a couple of high turnover performances for Jared Goff. And if there's something that Dallas's defense is absolutely known for this season, again, turnovers aren't necessarily sticky, but there is something to be said for
pick six Bland, baby.
How many they've
Was
been
it
getting?
5, 6? Pick six is how many?
So Bland, many. Yeah, he's got like he set a record like halfway through the season. I mean, Dallas has been exceptional at capitalizing on those opportunities, at creating those opportunities, and then maximizing the impact in terms of getting scores on defense. So this is the type of game where maybe Dan Campbell and the Lions are going to look to try to shorten it as much as they can. They've got two really good running backs in David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. Maybe it's a lot of, running the ball, keeping that clock moving, limiting the number of possessions that Dallas has on offense for putting up points, and hoping that's how you keep the game close and with a shot to win it. But it certainly feels like, as we're kind of like seeing the tiers kind of, stratify a little bit, that we're going to find the Lions just a little bit lower. I mean, I think we had it through most of the season, like San Francisco, Philadelphia, then Dallas alone, and then probably Lions at that top level. I think probably Dallas and Philadelphia are now kind of grouped together in that second tier below San Francisco. But Detroit, I feel, still is like that fourth, fifth best team in the NFC. And of course,
the Rams.
That can put them in a pretty tough spot if they got to be playing the Rams, and also tons of storylines for that one. So that would be a lot of fun to see.
I hope that happens.
But yeah, I'm definitely going with Dallas on this one as well. So that kind of wraps up all of our big game coverage for this week. We're now going to get into locks of the week, where we weren't 0-6, so we got that going for us.
Thank you, Tom.
Which is nice.
Oh my
my fantasy football inspired prop hit, but nothing else did, frankly.
No. And Tom, I'm going to take the positive road. Let's not forget when we were both 2-1 every week early in the season. This goes in swings. I think we're going to turn this around. I was 0-3, very, very disappointing. My worst week of the year so far. Bills -12 over the Chargers. Man, I missed that. Bills winning 24-22 at a field goal late in the game. Colts +1 at the Falcons. Now, to be fair, when I placed this bet, I didn't realize Michael Pittman Jr. would be ruled out. That definitely hurt him. That moved the line quite a bit. But the Falcons did take care of business, 29-10. And then, Niners -5.5. I had that one, and, didn't happen. Ravens winning 33-19. You were 1-2. You had Dolphins, Cowboys over 50 points. It was 22-20 Miami, 42 points. Your fantasy-inspired theme, T. Higgins, over 57.5 receiving yards. He had 140 yards. Easy money there on that one. And then Bills -7. First half line against the Chargers. It was wrong, 14-10 Chargers. What do you have for us this week? I'm predicting a 6-0 week for the show, Tom.
Yeah, let's hope. And many thanks to T. Higgins. I am in the championship for Dynasty Football League that started up this
And
year.
in ours as
Definitely.
well.
What's up?
You're in the championship in our league as well.
I am in the championship in our league as well. I've got an uphill
Casselman.
battle against Jerry this week, so that'll be.
I think you guys have won like the last 4 titles. I think he won like back to back, and you won back.
And then I've gone back to back. So I mean, I'm 3 times as strong.
It's a heavyweight battle to say the least.
A rivalry, a game that certainly isn't a rivalry. However, is the University of Missouri and the Ohio State University. Woo! I believe. Let me just check the line that I had.
MIZ, it's 3.5 now, spread. Tom. 3.5.
Oh, so that's pretty good. I'll take that extra half a point as I punched it in right there. I mean, I think Mizzou, like I said earlier in the show, is going to win outright. So for those who like to be a little bit more loose with the purse strings, plus 150 if you want to have
plus
winning
money,
outright. But,
Tigers.
I'm not. I'm going to keep it for the show here. I like Missouri minus 105. I mean, still pretty. You're not paying too much juice if you want Missouri just to cover that line. Next up, I'm going to go Cardinals and Eagles over 48 points as the game total. The Eagles' pass defense just has not been what it was last season, and it's something that I thought would possibly round into form as the season's gone on, and that simply has not been the case. Also, though, the Cardinals' defense is not particularly strong, so I kind of see both teams being able to get the ball up and down the field. It probably will be a significant margin for an Eagles victory, but I think, again, the Cardinals, they have, with Kyler Murray at quarterback, they have just enough weapons that they can keep it. They can keep it kind of interesting, put points up on the board. So I like over 48 there. And then I'm going to tail some action that you had last week, Kamen. As we said, Rams are a dangerous team. I'm going to take them -5. I did not write down who they are going up against. The New York Giants. That's moved. Okay, so that's moved to 5.5 on Bovada.
Tyrod Taylor in for Tommy DeVito.
Yeah, and I mean the Giants, regardless of quarterback, not particularly strong. Pretty bad. Matthew Stafford playing at a really, really high level right now. Perhaps should be in the conversation for MVP at some point with an outside chance.
Great quarterback. The most underrated quarterback in NFL history. I actually saw something. I saw something about Matthew Stafford. They were showing off the all-time receiving seasons, most receiving yards in a season. Calvin Johnson, second most Cooper Kupp, and the most receiving yards for a rookie, Puka Nacua. Matthew Stafford, the quarterback of all three. You look at passing yards per game. You look at clutch drives. You look at toughness. I mean, this guy, he's the real deal. He played for the Lions for many, many years, and that's why he gets underappreciated. But Matthew Stafford, for me, Tom, easily a Hall of Fame quarterback. He's better than Eli Manning. He's better than Phillip Rivers. He's better than a lot of these guys that are shoo-in Hall of Famers.
Yeah.
I think he's earned the Hall of Fame because he got that ring. I think he is going to get in, but there's still some people out there that debate it. I don't think it should be a debate, personally.
He's kind of like the thing that I've seen, and I kind of agree with it, is he's Patrick Mahomes without all the winning.
Yeah.
Because you look at some of the plays that he makes. A little
bit lesser version, but similar. He's got the off-angle throws. He's got the big arm. I can see the comparison. A little bit lesser version of Patrick Mahomes.
I don't know. If we took Patrick Mahomes
I don't want to say a poor man's...
If we gave Patrick Mahomes the Detroit situation, I think they look pretty strong.
That's what he has right now. There's still
he hasn't had that his entire career.
No, I know.
I'm saying that's...
Yeah.
I mean, there were a lot of 9-7 seasons for Detroit when Stafford's
I would be careful and say, he's not quite there, but he's similar enough. It's not like he's Patrick Mahomes, but it's not like he's poor man's Patrick Mahomes. It's somewhere in that middle.
He's the prototype.
Yes.
He's the prototype to the archetype. So, yeah, those are my 3 picks. Mizzou plus 3.5. Eagles, Cardinals over 48 on the game total. Rams minus 5.5 against the Giants. And, Cardinals and Eagles, that's still at 48.
I might have to tail you on that Rams pick. I am not going to put it on locks of the week.
Oh, I figured that would be locked in because you that was a good pick for you. Was it 2 weeks ago?
Well, I actually had the Rams the last few weeks in a row. But I did, last week, it was my 4th one I removed out of our picks. The Rams
That was what it
-4.
was. Yeah.
So it did not work out. I've noticed a trend, Tom. I have
Mhm.
done historically amazing betting on Thursday night football in recent weeks.
Mhm.
Historically, not so great on Sundays. Uh, just okay on Mondays. Thursday night has been good to me. So I haven't made a lot of Thursday night picks just because, we do the show on Thursday. By the time I post it, what's going to happen? But I say blot of that. I'm on a losing streak. I got to go with what works. Last week, I talked about my bonus pick being Rams -4. They covered easily. I'm going to go for some W's, Tom. I'm going to go for some props for you here. I've been
Ooh.
doing good on Thursday night football props as well. So I'm going to hit you with 2 of my 3 picks. We're going Thursday night football this week. I'll go Trevor Siemian under 176.5 passing yards. The Browns allow just 160.1 passing yards per game this year. Siemian in his start against the Dolphins had just 110 pass yards. This last game against Washington, 217, but that is the worst defense in the National Football League. I don't see him getting much yardage in this game. I think the Jets are going to have some limited success running the ball because Breece Hall is awesome. But I think some of his pass yards last week was on like a screen pass to Hall, too, that was a bunch of yards or something. So I just don't see him getting, more than 177 pass yards. On the flip side, yeah. I know how good the Jets defense is against the pass. Sauce Gardner, one of the best shutdown defenses, but Joe Flacco simply does not care. This man, he's a older veteran. He's got nothing to lose. He was on his couch at the beginning of this season without a job, gets called by the Browns after an array of injuries, and this guy is just out there flinging the ball. Is Flacco going to have 2 or 3 turnovers in this game? Probably. That's probably going to happen. But big shot Flacco, a gunslinger quarterback, he's going to be out there airing the ball out. So his total is only 234.5 pass yards. That's not a very, very high total. I know the Jets allow a lot less than that, but you look at what Flacco is doing. His 4 starts this season, 254 the first one, which is still 20 yards more than this over-under. Then the last 3 weeks, 311, 374, 368. Flacco's going to let it fly, baby. One of the best stories in the NFL, Mr. Old Age Flacco, going to lead the Browns to the playoffs, and who knows what's going to happen when they get there. So I think he'll get to 235 pass yards tonight. No problem. And then lastly, I'm going with you as well, Tom. Mizzou plus 3.5 against Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl. Mizzou has a lot of good history in the Cotton Bowl. Took out Arkansas, took out Oklahoma State. I know those stats don't matter much, but to me, it's kind of fun. Let's go with the Cotton Bowl Mizzou theme. You were just talking about it earlier. I was talking about it. The Buckeyes starting quarterback, Kyle McCord, in the transfer portal. Marvin Harrison Jr., the likely number 2 overall pick in the draft, does not look like he's going to play in this game at wide receiver. Meanwhile, Mizzou, Debo Samuel 2.0 and Luther Burden III. The SEC at wide receiver, SEC's leading rusher, Cody Schrader. He's going to be playing in this game. Brady Cook's going to be playing. Mizzou has more of its core team there. None of this transfer portal, none of this opt-out, none of this NFL draft stuff. Mizzou cares. Mizzou matters. Mizzou not only wins outright, they covered 3.5 easily, and then win the game outright. Give me the Tigers plus 3.5 on Friday.
Looking forward to it, cheering on old alma mater. So just to clarify, you had Siemian under 176.5 and Flacco was over 234.5?
Yes, 176.5 under,
Perfect.
234.5 over for Flacco.
Fantastic. Well, we certainly saw some history last night as we move into trivia. I just kind of looked this up as the show was going on because it piqued my interest.
Sure.
Miller Moss for the USC Trojans threw 6 touchdown passes in the Holiday Bowl, which led me to think, that's kind of a lot of touchdown passes in the game. I know in the NFL, the record is 7 touchdown passes in the game. So Tom, I'm going to ask you this question. And because it's just a number, that's all I'm looking for. I'll give you 3 attempts before I'll give you the answer. Can you
Okay.
tell me what is the college football record for the most touchdown passes thrown in a game by a single player?
College football record for most touchdown passes in a game?
Yep. One player threw X number of touchdowns in a game, and it's probably going to be an untouchable record. I don't think this is ever getting broken.
9.
No, that's one.
Do I have to play or the guesses?
No, just I'm giving you 3 guesses before I just give the number because there's nothing else
And
to
then
do
I
beside
then I
that.
can guess the player, right?
Yeah, if you want to. I had no idea who this guy was, though.
Is it Ty Detmer?
Nope.
11 touchdown passes.
It is 11 touchdown passes by Houston's David Klingler
I don't
in
know who that is.
1990. He
Okay.
played for Houston, and he threw them against Eastern Washington. The final score in that game, 84-21. Klingler ended up going to the NFL. I believe he was chosen 6th overall, where in 33 games as a professional quarterback, he threw a grand total of 16 touchdown passes. So peaked early. Peaked early.
Did
But yeah,
almost as
11
much in that
touchdown
same
passes in
game.
one game.
Yeah.
That's video game numbers right there. I
That's
don't even.
nuts. You know what the NFL record is? I know what it is off the top of my head. It's multiple guys are tied for it.
Yeah, it's 7 touchdown passes, and there's like
I want to
there's a
say
decent
Flacco
handful.
might be. I know Manning is. Flacco might be on that list. Let me see. I'll look it up right now just out of curiosity.
The one name that I know, and of course I would know it, is Y.A. Tittle from the
Y.A.
New York
Tittle's
Giants
on there.
back in like the 60s or whenever he played.
Mm-hmm.
I like how I know that one, but if you asked me like to name everybody, I probably wouldn't get all the modern guys.
Oh, wow. So there's actually 8 quarterbacks, 7 touchdown passes, a lot of modern guys.
Yeah, because
can you name them? So Y.A. Tittle was one of them. I already gave you Manning, obviously.
Yeah. For some reason, Matt Schaub, he was most passing yards in the game, I think. So not Matt Schaub.
Yeah, it's not Matt Schaub. I'll give you some old ones. Sid Luckman for the Bears.
Forgot about
Adrian
that.
Burke, George Blanda, Y.A. Tittle, and Joe Cap. And then there's
I forgot about Luckman. That makes sense because it was 73-0 over the Washington franchise at that time.
Yep, exactly.
Would it be Stafford? I was thinking of like the gunslinger.
It was actually
guys,
the Giants game that Luckman had the 7 touchdowns.
Oh,
no, it's Manning. It's not Flacco. It's, probably the most underrated quarterback of all time. Gets no respect.
Is it Stafford?
No. Stafford's the second most underrated. I've changed my mind. A guy that is statistically arguably the best quarterback of all time.
Brees?
Drew Brees. And the other guy was the former Bear quarterback briefly. A guy that is very, very, streaky. You know how they have the streaky guys in the NBA? The most streaky quarterback in the NFL. And he's had some unbelievable streaks. Super Bowl winning quarterback. Not with the Bears.
Played for the Bears. Of course, not with the Bears, but played for the Bears.
Played for the Bears pretty recently.
So won the Super Bowl.
Yep. He didn't start the season as the starter, but he finished in the right way.
There's so many.
Super Bowl is also fairly recent, too.
Wouldn't be Cordell Stewart.
No, more recent. Like, we're talking recent here. Within the last 10 years, Tom. He played for the Bears within the last 5. Heck, was it even 3 years ago he was a Bear? Very recently, or maybe even 2 years ago, actually. Very recent Chicago Bear quarterback.
I'm drawing a blank on this, and I don't know why.
There is a specific city that, there's a special play that he made. They give him beers every time he walks in there. There's actually, I think, a statue.
Oh, Nick Foles.
Nick Foles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That he's like a trivia question all into himself.
Yep.
So there's trivia for the week. moving into statements of the week, I'm sure that since Monday night, we've seen a lot of discourse on Lamar Jackson and how a lot of people are retreading some old ground as far as him and his MVP campaign is going. And essentially, the time I'm going back to is the NFL offseason when Lamar Jackson was essentially a free agent. He was tagged with the transition tag, which means that other teams were free to reach out to Lamar and his representation and sign him to an offer sheet, which the Baltimore Ravens could match. Or if the Ravens declined to match, Lamar Jackson would go to the team that signed him, and they would have to send 2 picks to the Baltimore Ravens. And if we remember at that time how many teams just immediately came out and said, we're not interested in Lamar Jackson. I mean, you look at Arthur Blank, the owner for the Atlanta Falcons, a team that in a very poor NFC South could
the
absolutely
worst quarterback in the NFL, Desmond Ritter. Right?
They could certainly have used an upgrade.
Maybe. I mean, Zach Wilson, but he wasn't supposed to be the starter.
Yeah, I mean, let's go to, say, Carolina. Could you imagine the Carolina Panthers, Kamen, if they had Lamar Jackson at quarterback and still had DJ Moore at wide receiver? Because to sign an offer sheet, just an offer sheet, all that would cost the Panthers is 2 first-round picks, which they gave up 2 first-round picks plus a second plus DJ Moore to get Bryce Young, who, sure, could be good at some point, certainly not good right now.
I'd rather have Lamar, probably.
But yeah, like they fired their coach, Frank Reich, this season because the season has been going so poorly. That screams to me an owner that probably wanted to win this year. So it was a clear mistake.
Yeah, he wanted to win this year because they don't get to keep their number 1 overall pick.
Yeah. Well, exactly. Like it was a clear mistake then. And it's an even clearer mistake now. And I mean, it's somewhat speculative, but we can pretty easily surmise the reasons that these teams were out on Lamar. It's pretty simple. Owners assumed that he would rightfully command a fully guaranteed quarterback contract, similar to the one that the Browns gave to Deshaun Watson, who injured right now, and also, frankly, hasn't
played great
as much as Lamar Jackson has in his career, plus is a garbage human being.
That's true.
Those are all things that were pushed to the wayside, whereas you have Lamar Jackson, who, not a perfect player, but certainly a dynamic one. I mean, I think it's safe to say he's a top 10 quarterback in the NFL.
Easily.
Certainly.
And I'm not the biggest Lamar fan, but he's top
possibly
10,
one of the 5 most exciting, just pure entertainment value guys to watch with everything that he can do. Multiple teams said we are out, not even going to call to see if he actually wants a fully guaranteed contract. That was all speculation. Nobody even picked up the phone and called. And that's because it was in the better interest of all these owners to make the business decision to control and limit future player contracts than it was to actually win. So it's just, my statement is really nice to see this comeuppance come for a lot of NFL teams that were in the quarterback wasteland, are probably going to continue being in the quarterback wasteland because they turned down a perfectly good opportunity to answer a really, really big question mark, but they chose not to because they wanted to cut off their noses to spite their own face.
Yeah, and I'm like the prime example of someone who isn't necessarily the biggest Lamar fan. You know that, Tom.
Mm-hmm.
I do think I've probably underappreciated him a little bit, but I've always said he's a top 10 quarterback in the league. Never heard me say otherwise. I'm just, it's the whole thing of he's a very, very good regular season quarterback. Can that translate in the playoffs? I haven't seen it yet. We'll see if that's the case. But in terms of, if you could get a top 10 quarterback in the league, probably worth paying him. He might be top 5. It really depends. For him, the biggest issue is health. I know passing the ball sometimes is an issue as well, but health is the number 1 issue. And yeah, I agree with you. A big reason why they did that is because they want to control the quarterback contract. They're greedy. I think the health part was also part of it. But he's been healthy right now, so I gotta agree with you. I really couldn't come up with a statement. I have all these bold things to say every week. I guess my statement, Tom, is that uh, I'm ready to. I'm not going to do it. I probably should because you know how much I love to bet sports. I'm not going to commit to this. I'm
Uh
saying we
huh.
have this show. We're gonna pick. We're gonna make picks, but I'm done trying to sound like I know what I'm talking about in the NFL. So should everyone. I mean, if you watch these talk shows and these pregame shows, and everybody's wrong every week, there's no experts in the NFL this year. It is
Mm-hmm.
absolutely crazy. And we've had 7 straight Monday night football underdogs win straight up, not on the spread. They've won straight up. It's about to be 8 straight because Green
Mm-hmm.
Bay is a slight underdog against Miami, who's going to. I know they started him in that game Dobbs was in, but I don't know. It's gonna be ugly. It just like you were saying earlier, we were shoe shining the Niners. They were
Mm-hmm.
guaranteed in the Super Bowl. They're gonna win the whole thing. Brock Purdy. He's legit. Blah blah blah. And I don't think we can really predict this NFL season. So I'm probably gonna, whenever we get to the playoffs, I'm probably just gonna pick the Chiefs because I want them to win. I'm probably not gonna believe it, but there's really no team I really believe in right now. I mean, you look at the teams that are the best right now, and you look at their recent history, you look at their star players. I mean, what? Lamar has 1 playoff win. Brock Purdy is 0. Dak is what, 2, maybe 3? I don't know. Not many. I mean, Mahomes has the proven record, but the Chiefs can't catch the ball right now.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, is there a team I really trust in the NFL? I mean, Jalen Hurts is just, talk about Mahomes and Kansas City having issues. What in the world is going on in Philadelphia? I mean, there's not a team I look at and I trust. I was ready to believe in the Niners, and then Brock Purdy threw 4 interceptions. So I just we're gonna reason out things. We're gonna make picks, but I'm a person who's confident. You know me. I believe in what I say. Doesn't always happen, but I'm like Kobe Bryant. Every shot I take, I think I'm gonna win. Every
Mm-hmm.
pick I make, I think I'm gonna win. For this year, for this NFL season, I've given up, Tom. I'm just gonna say stuff, but I don't believe in anything I'm saying, nor do I believe in anything you're saying or anything anyone else is saying, because we just do not know what's gonna happen from a betting perspective, from
Mm-hmm.
perspective of being like a sports, you know, announcer, commentator, broadcaster. It stinks. From a fan perspective, it's crazy. Like, it's fun. It is interesting to see what's going to happen every week. I mean, even look at the Steelers. What in the world happened in that last game against the Bengals? Mason Rudolph looked like Tom Brady in that last game. I mean, the NFL is crazy right now, Tom. There is nothing that we can sit here and say confidently it's going to happen. Look at what the Patriots did. The Broncos fighting for a playoff spot. New England fighting for the first or second overall pick. The
Mm-hmm.
Patriots beat the Broncos. The Raiders beat the Chiefs without having a completion for 3 quarters. I mean, we had the Ravens clobber the Niners. Again, not a shock that the Ravens won, but to win by 14. I mean, all the underdogs were winning these primetime games, Tom. The only favorite that won on Christmas or, Christmas Eve or whatever, the Sunday, Monday games, was the Eagles. And they barely beat the Giants. The Giants had the last play of the game, a chance to win the game on the road in
Mm-hmm.
Philadelphia. So, take it for what it's worth, but nobody knows what they're talking about. Nobody. It's not me. It's not you,
Yeah.
Tom. Nobody has any clue what's going to happen. And anyone that says the NFL is scripted, yeah, you're crazy. You can't even script some of the upsets this year. It's crazy, man. It's absolutely crazy.
Yeah. Well, no, it's a fun place to be to kind of relinquish that sort of oh, I'm forgetting what the old Johnny Carson wherever wears the big headdress thing. But yeah, that's why I like looking at the whys that things happen. And yeah, we can look at them and say, hey, because a team is really good with this sort of run game or this sort of coverage that they'll be able to limit another team in doing it, and then
it doesn't make
it
sense.
just yeah, it's a lot. That I mean, that's why we watch the games, and it's so fun to recap them every week. Because yeah, sometimes what was the tweet that I saw? It was if you're in your if you lost your fantasy football semifinal, it's because you're unlucky and there were injuries and the other team, just got lucky with their plays. And if you won your fantasy football semifinal, it's because you're the smartest person who's ever played fantasy football and never got your skill or your talent. So
whenever
that's
I
what
get
it
it
is.
right, that's how it is.
Exactly.
I mean,
exactly.
You know what quarterback has had the best 3 weeks last? The last 3 weeks in a row, over 300 pass yards. Joe Flacco. Who had that on their bingo card? Joe Flacco would be leading the Browns to a first place finish in the AFC North. Second place finish, I guess the Ravens. But who had Flacco leading the Browns to the playoffs? I mean, you have the Ravens, you have the Bengals who played in 2 straight AFC championship games and a Super Bowl. You have the Steelers, one of the best organizations in the history of football. And the Browns are right there with all of them. Crazy. Crazy. Cool. Oh, well, Tom, guess what? This is the last show for the year. I'm not gonna see you again until next year.
Yeah, well, that's good because I was going to tell you at the end of the show that I refuse to do the show the rest of the year. I'm boycotting doing the show the rest of the year.
The rest of the year, okay.
Yeah, I refuse to do Salute Your Sports for the rest of the year.
We're done for 2023.
Next year we can talk about doing the show again, but for this year I'm out. I know it's hard to say. I know it's hard to hear.
We need a break.
Yeah,
we need the last 3 days to take off. So there you go. It's been a fun year. Salute to you and everyone else. It's been a fun 2023. Certainly looking forward to a lot more of the show and just life in general in 2024. I'm one of those weirdos who believes in that fresh start feeling. I know it doesn't really matter, but you reset the clock to that new date. That is very, very exciting. So I'm pumped for the new year. So very, very excited. It's actually kind of weird because, I normally work all this time, but I'm getting a 4-day weekend to close the year. So it's my last day doing the show today, last day working today at work. So gonna take a little breather the last few days of 2023 and look forward to an awesome 2024. Thank you, Tom, for another great show. Thank you to all the listeners, the viewers. You guys are great. And we'll see you next year. See ya.